Kevin here from DIYDoorwork.com. Today I want to show you how to make a super simple pallet wood table using really basic tools that any beginner can do and not mess up. So anyway, check this out. It's really awesome. It's really easy to make. Alright, so here's all I'm using to build my little pallet wood table. Very, very simple. I have some leftover pallet wood from some pallets that I've broken up the last couple of months and used for projects, and these are the pieces I had left over. They're kind of odd size. They're roughly 3.5 inches wide. They're all about 50 inches long, or basically over 4 feet long, and they're only 1/2 inch thick. So I was trying to figure out a project I could use them on and see how they kind of don't match and they're all a little goofy looking. Well, I think on this project they'll actually be perfect. Now also, I have some leftover 2x4s here that are about 18 inches long, and I believe these are left over from my giant Jenga set I made a while back. I cut these off because I didn't like how the corners were missing there, but on this project it'll work fine. I'm gonna use that banged up distress look to my advantage. So anyway, it's been raining, it's all gross out, and I'm trying to beat the rain, and I'm only going to be using a chop saw this time. I'm not going to be using a table saw or anything fancy. I actually burned out my table saw last week, and I just recently got a new one. I've still been kind of setting it up, so I decided to do something really simple that actually look awesome that any beginner could do with pallet wood. So here we go. Alright, so first things first, I need to measure them out and mark them at 36 inches. And I'll do that to all of them, and then I'll start chopping them next. Alright, I got them all marked, so now just a real simple cut. And I'll do the rest, and then I'll show you how I clean them up after that. Alright, now this pallet wood is about as rough as it comes. I mean, it's got some nasty edges on it that we have to sand off. So I'm just using my palm sander here with about a 60 grit on there, and I've been using it so it's a little worn down. But that's just enough to tear off all this texture. I mean, you could easily get splinters off this thing. So I'm going to smooth out both the big flat sides, then the edges, and then I'm just going to hit the corners real quick, and that will help knock off all the little frayed areas and then just prevent splinters. Alright, and just that quick, this pallet wood went from just super rough. I mean, I can't really portray it through the video, but this is extremely rough. Now it's nice and smooth and not bad at all. So I'll finish sanding them, I'll show you what they look like, and I'll show you what I do next. Alright, so all my wood is sanded. It's real nice and smooth and got really cool texture to it. And I even have my 2x4s sanded smooth. And I rounded off the edges a little bit and just finished them up. So now it's time to start finishing everything, and I'll start with the 2x4s. Alright, now to finish off the 2x4s, I'm going to go for that really raw industrial look. So I'm going to use some metallic silver spray paint. I'm going to put a really crappy paint job on it. I'm just going to go over it real fast. I don't care if it doesn't completely cover it, but I'll just make sure that it's mostly covered. Alright, once it dries, I'm going to go over it with sandpaper, just real quick, kind of knock off the edges, kind of smooth it out so that some of the wood still pops through, and when it's done it has a really cool look to it. I'll show you what I mean. Alright, check that out. Once I get it all sanded, some of the wood pops through, and it just has this kind of like natural wood metallic look to it. It's really, really cool. Very industrial and raw. So I'll finish these up, and then I'll show you how I finish the pallet pieces. Alright, now to finish the wood, I'm just using some clear lacquer, and just put on a coat real quick. And I know you're supposed to brush this on, but I found that on crappy wood like this, it don't matter if you rub it on. And anyway, put a coat on there, and I'll coat all 4 sides, or 6 sides I guess really. Anyway, once it dries, I'm going to go over it with a fine grit, super fine grit sanding block just to kind of smooth it out, and then I'll take a clean rag and just kind of buff it real quick, and then these will be ready to go too, and they'll be nice and protected. Okay, now that my boards have a nice thick coat of that clear lacquer on them, I need to sand them. And what I'm going to do is use this really fine grit sanding block, and I'm just going to go over it real quick. And what that will do is just smooth out that clear coat and the wood. Now the reason I have to sand it is because when you add clear coat like this, especially to wood that was just sanded, all the wood fibers are kind of loosened up, and especially because I was using that 60 grit to really tear through the super rough texture, the sanding paper smoothed it out, but then once I put this clear coat on there, all those loose fibers harden up again and they kind of stick up. So then it kind of feels like, you know, sandpaper again. So when you smooth it out, it kind of levels it all out and gets a really nice finish. Now the problem is that once you sand it, I don't know if it'll show on camera, but you start getting little pockets of where it collects dust. So what I'm gonna do next is, after I completely sand it, I'm gonna take a damp rag and then just kind of buff it out. And that'll get rid of all those dust marks, and then you'll be left with a nice smooth finish. So I'll do the rest of these and then I'll show you how to start assembling this thing. Now I'm gonna start prepping the board, so I just threw a piece of tape on there real quick so that I could draw on there my measurements without messing up the board top. And anyway, I took my tape measure and I measured in 3/4 inch from each side and then 3/4 inch from this edge. I made those little cross marks. That'll tell me where to drill. Then I found a drill bit that is roughly the same size as the screws I'm going to use, and I'm just going to drill 2 holes. I'll do that on both ends of each board, and then this thing will be ready to start putting together. Alright, now that all my boards are drilled out, it's time to start assembling it. So I'm grabbing my end piece here. First thing I'm going to do is put a little strip of glue on there. That'll add a nice extra little security padding there when we put this together to help it hold together. Alright, so I'm going to line it up and make sure that it's nice and square. And once it's where I want it, then I'm going to take my clamp. I'm just going to clamp it in place so it don't move, so I can do the next step. Alright, now that I got clamped in place really tight, I'm going to take my drill again, this time with an even smaller bit, and I'm going to pre-drill through both these holes so that when my screw goes down into this 2x4 end piece, it's not going to split. You can't see this one over here, but I got one over here as well. Alright, I'll take that out. Alright, now I got my little bit to drive in the screw, and just put screws in there. And I'm using these little machine screws because I like the look of the head, that kind of rounded head with a flat bottom. I think it'll add to the industrial look of this. So I'll screw this one in, and then I'll show you how I kind of do the rest, because I got a little pattern I'm going to do with them. Alright, so here's what I decided to do. This is what I showed you earlier. I decided to go ahead and drive this screw out a little bit so that this one is holding. Alright, did the same thing over here. Went ahead and put that one in and just made sure that the one in the corner was in. Then I put the second board over here on the very end. Same thing, one screw over here, nothing there yet. The reason I did that is so that I can square this up before I start putting all the boards together. Because I can actually shift it. You know, it'll kind of look like a, what do they call it, a parallelogram or whatever. But I can make sure it's nice and square before I drive down the rest of these screws. Then I can start working in the pieces in the middle. So let me get them tightened down, and then I'll show you how I do the pieces in the middle. Alright, now that my end pieces are screwed down tight, I dropped in my 3 middle pieces, and what I'm going to do is slide the 2 outer ones against the edge, so that way I only have to work with the gaps here. So I can take my middle piece and I can adjust it until that gap looks nice and even. Okay. Once it's ready to go, I can put a little bit of glue under there. I can drill them, screw them down nice and tight. Once it's in place, then it's really easy to adjust these as well. You know, just get them so that their gap looks nice and even, and then same thing, glue, drill, screw them down. Also, I'm going to make sure to clamp them while I'm doing that so they don't move on me. Then I'll have nice even gaps. Once all these pieces are down and they're screwed down tight, I can just flip the whole thing over and repeat the process. Put the 2 end pieces down first, glue them and screw them down, then drop all 3 in, slide these out, figure out the gap on that one, then figure out the gaps on the others. It'll be totally assembled after that, and then it's time to put on the legs. Alright, now that my tabletop is completely assembled, I flipped it upside down, so this is the bottom of it, and put on my legs. It's really simple. I bought these little brackets that are angled. You can see how they have an angle here. And I want to face them so that the legs will angle out from the corner of the table. Alright, then when I install these, I'm just using these little short 1/2-inch screws so they don't poke through the wood here. And I'll make sure that I don't set them on top of one of these screws, because it's going to wobble like that. I want it to sit nice and flat against this. But I also want it to be as close to the corner as I can, so it's not like too far inward. So easy way to do that, I just kind of eyeball it, and I just make sure that this gap right here between the metal and the wood is the same as this gap over here. Once that looks right, then I'm ready to go. Okay, now the legs I'm using are these really cool tapered kind of mid-century design that I got in the store. Real cheap, they're like $2.50 each or something like that. But I didn't like that they were just wood. I wanted them to kind of match these end caps right here. So I did the same thing, painted them silver and then sanded them really quickly, and they get that cool kind of 50% wood, 50% metal look. It's very, very kind of raw industrial. And then they just have a little screw on the bottom here. It screws right into the middle there, real easy. So I'll go ahead, I'll install these, I'll put the legs on, I'll finish painting this one as well, and then I'll flip the whole thing upside down and I'll show you what the table looks like totally finished. All right, now check it out. It turned out pretty sweet. I really like the texture that this old pallet wood has. Even though I've sanded it smooth, still you can kind of feel it a little bit, although you're not going to get any splinters off of it anymore. And then I also like the variation between the boards. When I laid them out, I tried to make sure to kind of go almost like a stripe effect. So you can see these are more brown tones here, and then this one's more gray, and then brown, then a little more gray, and then brown again. I just think details like that really help it, you know, pop a little more. And of course, the little screw heads here just adds a little flair of industrial design. And then of course the silver metallic distressed end panels, and then the matching legs. It's just kind of a cool feature. And then I'll show you something over here. It's really awesome. This one had a lot of texture, so when that paint got in the little grooves and then I sanded it, the shiny parts still stayed inside the grooves and then everything else dulled out. So it really shows off that texture. But this thing's perfect. You can store anything you want on there, magazines and remotes and whatever. You can kick your feet up there. The one thing with the wood I used from my pallet is it was kind of an odd pallet. It was really thin. So there's a little bit of flex in mine. You can see the boards move a little bit. But on most pallets, they're going to be hardwood. They're going to be a lot stiffer. And then even if you used plywood for this, or 1x4s, they're going to be 3/4 of an inch thick and a lot sturdier. So I don't think I'd be doing any backyard wrestling moves on it, but just to kick your feet up and rest whatever books and all that, it'd be perfect. So this was a super easy project. So I encourage you, if you've never built anything like this one's really easy to try out. So give it a shot.